What's up, guys? It's Jay with Bearded Dad Fishing, and you guys know that I love kayak fishing. I've made a ton of videos over the last 3 years about fishing and gotten so many people into the sport, but I gotta be honest, there's some things about kayak fishing that plain old suck.
My kayak's sinking.
And if you can't handle these 13 things about kayak fishing, then maybe kayak fishing isn't for you, and that's totally okay. But first, dad joke of the day: why did the banana go to the doctor? He wasn't peeling well. And that dad joke is brought to us by my buddy Joe Nager of the Facebook group Kayak Fishing Dads. Make sure you check us out on Facebook. First reason kayak fishing sucks is the lack of storage. There is not a lot of storage when you're kayak fishing. You're basically limited to what you can fit in your hatch in front of you if you have a hatch, or what's in your tank well behind you, and that's it. If you have a hard time paring down your lures and bringing with you only what you need for the day, then kayak fishing might not be for you. If you're fishing on a boat, and especially if you're used to fishing on a boat where you could bring 10, 15 rods and all the tackle you want in the world, then you're gonna be used to that, and you're not gonna have that same luxury when you're kayak fishing. Everything, like I said, is in the hatch or behind you. And having to reach behind you, you gotta be pretty flexible and somewhat nimble to get that stuff behind you, because you don't wanna lose balance and go in for a swim. But you have what's in your crate behind you, and that's it. Maybe 6 rods. You can modify to bring 10 rods. You can also bring other tackle under your seat and your front hatch if you have a front hatch or a front tank well. So there's other options, but for the most part, that's all you have. You cannot bring with you your entire garage worth of fishing tackle. It just requires you to be intentional with what you're bringing with you. If you're a minimalist, then this is right up your alley. You don't have to take everything and the kitchen sink with you. You could just take what you're doing for the day, targeting smallmouth or walleye or whatever it is. And the second reason kayak fishing sucks is that you're in a confined space. So in addition to this lack of storage, you're just right there. So if this is my kayak and I'm sitting right here, I only have this space to work with. For the most part, everything I'm doing is right on my lap. I'm not standing up to go over there to do this and going over there to do this. No, everything's right here. So if you're not well organized, it can become a mess incredibly fast. And if you're not organized, that can become dangerous. If you have a lot of rods laying around and treble hooks laying around and you take a spill in the water, you could get easily tangled up in that stuff. In some kayaks that have a little bit more of a weight capacity, you might be able to stand up, walk a little bit to the front, but unless you're Christine Fisher, you're not jumping up on your front hatch to catch a fish. I'm certainly not doing that at 250 pounds because I'm just gonna go dive right into the water. But everything you're doing is basically right here in this little box. So if you don't like confined spaces or you feel claustrophobic, then maybe this is not for you when it comes to kayak fishing. Another reason kayak fishing sucks is the loading and unloading process. It can get super cumbersome, tiring, and repetitive having to load and unload your kayak all the time. So for example, if I'm going fishing and I'm taking my truck, I have to get my kayak out of my garage and into my truck bed. And then I have to load all my gear into my truck bed or my truck. Then I get to the lake, I have to unload my kayak, unload the gear, get the kayak in the water, and then I can go fishing. And then when I'm done fishing, I have to get it all back into the truck, all my gear, my kayak, everything else. And you're tired, you're fatigued already at this point, and then get home. And then once I get home, I gotta load it back into the garage. If that's your situation. A lot of times that's how people start. If you're not loading in your truck bed, you might be putting it on your roof rack on your car, and that's even more tiring, especially when you're out fishing all day on the water. This process can get really cumbersome over a period of time. If you tend to bring a lot of gear with you, this just exasperates that issue. If you have a lot of tackle, a lot of rods, if you want to bring a lot of electronics, say you got 2 fish finders, a live scope, a motor, and you have to set this all up every single time you get on the water, people can get really tired of that. And if you just want to be someone that just throws and goes, then maybe that's not for you. However, what I find to be one of the easiest things when it comes to loading and unloading my kayak is getting a trailer. Once I got my trailer on year 3, that was the best decision ever because it makes it a lot easier. Now you get to the ramp, You pull off in the staging area, you still have to get all your stuff onto your kayak, your motor, your fish finders, your rods, your tackle, all that stuff. And then you can get into the water and just wet launch your kayak. And that's a lot easier. And at the end of the day, you do the same thing. You bring your trailer into the water with your car, and then you load up your kayak, go out of the staging area, and then you unload everything and start over. So trailering is definitely the easiest when it comes to this process of loading and unloading, but you have to make the decision, is that something you want to do? And reason number 4 kayak fishing could suck is the wind. The wind is something that you have to get used to when you're in a kayak. You're in a very light vessel, all right? A lot of times under 100 pounds, many times much less than that. And the wind can just blow you away easily. Not much of your kayak is in the water. So you're somewhat on top of the water, and that wind is blowing you. You're gonna move around like a leaf in the water. A lot of people get discouraged by this, especially when they're paddling their first kayak and it gets windy and they cast, and then they realize halfway into your cast, I gotta move again. So either you gotta start paddling and doing this little weird paddling and like reeling thing, or you gotta just bring it back in and then move yourself again. It can get tiring to do that. The wind can make it pretty hard to be precise as far as your casting, as far as where you want to be, especially if you don't have a rudder. A rudder certainly helps. A cheap solution to this problem is get an anchor. Yes, it's something else you got to carry with you on the kayak, but get an anchor you can toss in and it locks you in place, and then you can cast all you want, and then when you're ready to move, just pull up the anchor and move again. Get an anchor wizard, makes it a little bit easier. If you want a more expensive solution to this issue, then maybe something like a micro power pole would be easier for you. If you fish more shallow waters, then that power pole, you just hit a button and it just goes right down and hits the ground and it locks you in place. You're not really moving around a whole lot. So that's another option if you're looking to spend a little bit more money. And reason number 5 kayak fishing could suck is that you get wet. It's very easy to get wet when you're kayak fishing, okay? You're sitting low in the water, like almost, you're barely gliding on the water. So when things happen, you get wet. When fish splash, when the water gets choppy, it's coming right over the bow of your kayak, you're getting wet. You're much more exposed to the elements in that way. Wakes will get you, the wind will get you, a lot of things will get you, and you will get wet. If you're paddling in the water because you don't have your pedal drive and you're out there paddling, chances are you're gonna get wet just from that because of the splash, because the water coming down from the pole, all these things. So if you don't like to get wet, if that's like a no-go, I don't wanna get wet, then this might not be for you. Also remember, you're much more likely to take a dive in your kayak. You might take a dip, you might turtle, whatever you want to call it. You might lose your balance and get into the water. You're a lot more likely to get wet. And in the colder months, the early spring, late fall, that can get even dangerous if you don't have the right gear. So make sure you get the right gear. Life jacket, 100% without a doubt. No matter what water you're in, what time of year you're in, you get the life jacket. If you're going out in the colder weather, get something like a dry suit or a semi-dry suit, which I'll link down below so you guys can check it out. And get decent rain gear as well. At least the rain pants will keep your pants nice and dry. If it's a little colder out and you don't want to get wet, that is the solution to that problem. But if you're like, no, I never want to get wet, then maybe kayak fishing isn't for you. And the 6th reason kayak fishing sucks is that it can get expensive super quick. A lot of people jump into kayak fishing because it's more accessible and generally it's cheaper. However, it's real easy to get misguided or just swing off the deep end and get into something expensive. There are some great kayaks for under 1,500 bucks, which I'll post that video down below so you can see what kayaks those are. But there's also a lot of kayaks that are much more expensive, in the upwards of $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 for these kayaks. But say you get something in the middle of the road, but all the peripherals now will add on. Your fish finder, are you getting live scope? Are you getting batteries for your electronics? Are you adding lights, navigation lights? Are you adding a motor? And then you have to think about your motor battery. Then you have to register your kayak if you get a motor. You get it? It can get expensive quick. It doesn't have to get out of hand. You can easily decide, hey, I'm gonna start kayak fishing and keep it under X amount of dollars, $1,000 bucks, 1,500 bucks. You can do it. I know guys that catch huge fish, way bigger than any fish I've ever landed, in a kayak that's like 1/10 of the price. So you can certainly do it. Just keep an eye on the price, because before you know it, you could be spending upwards of $10,000 on your setup. A good way to save money when it comes to kayak fishing is make your own tackle crate. Instead of getting one of the pre-made ones that could be up to 200 bucks, make your own tackle crate with a couple milk crates. I will link that video down below where I made my own DIY crate, and it was less than 40 bucks, and it lasted for a full 3 years before I replaced it. And only because I wanted to replace it, it was still kicking. And another way to save money is get yourself an affordable cart. If you're carting your kayak instead of trailering it, get an affordable cart like the Viver Heavy Duty Kayak Cart. And another way to save money is to ditch the fish finder. If you're just getting into kayak fishing and you're just getting maybe just into fishing in general, forget the fish finder for a year, maybe 2 years. Learn your kayak, learn to navigate it without it, learn to read the surroundings, nature, the fish, the birds, learn to read all that stuff, the time of the year before getting into a fish finder. Because once you get into a fish finder, then you got to rig your kayak, then you got to get the battery for your fish finder, then you might get into a relay switch, all this type of stuff, which they're all awesome things and I love them, but it makes things a little bit more complicated. So I would say ditch the fish finder for a year or two until you get your bearings, and then get it later. And lastly, don't skimp on a good PFD. That is not the way to save money when it comes to kayak fishing. Don't be one of those guys that spends $3,000 on their kayak and then they spend 20 bucks on their life jacket. It's meant to save your life. Spend the money on it. Get a good $100 one if you have to. The cheaper ones, the cheapest ones I would recommend are in that $65 to $70 range, which are the Onyx ones that you can find on Amazon. I'll link it down below. But if you want to get an NRS Chinook or Chinook OS, you're going to be in that $100 to $150 range. But it's going to last you for a long time, and it's going to save your life if you ever get in a pinch. And the seventh reason kayak fishing sucks is that you need to have decent balance. You're now in a kayak that can tip over if you're not careful. If you're not keeping your center of gravity right here in line, you can tip over. If you go like this and your shoulder starts to come over, you can potentially tip over. And that has happened very often, especially when people turn around to get their kayak crate or they're going ahead to grab something in their front hatch. You tip over if you're not paying attention. Even small wakes can throw you off balance. If you're standing and fishing because you have the stability in your kayak to do that and you have some decent balance, and a wake comes and gets you either from the side or from behind, it can become very easy for you to lose your balance and fall out of your kayak. So at that point, your kayak's not even flipping, you're just falling out. That's happened to countless amount of anglers. So you do need some decent balance. Some ways to work around this is A, get yourself a stable kayak. Not all kayaks are built equally. Some are narrower, some are wider, some have different styles of hulls, whether it's a cathedral hull, a double U hull. Get something that will be more stable. Generally, the wider and the longer of the kayak, the more stable it will be. Also, if you have trouble standing up, you can get something like the stand assist bars, and they're ones that kind of lock into the rails of your kayak. A lot of people don't like them because they get in the way of your casting if you're sitting, but if you're standing quite often, it might be worth it. There's also stand assist straps. Rogue Fishing has some available where you just tie it up to either your drive or your handle in the front, and you leave it laying there and you just grab it and it helps you stand up. Something like that is helpful as well. Or get yourself an upgraded comfortable chair, a good seat cushion so that you don't have to get out of your seat. A kayak cushion is an amazing investment. People rave about it. I didn't get one for the longest time, and when I did, the difference was incredible. It's such a big difference when you're out there for 6 or 8, 10 hours on the water and you have a good cushion underneath your butt cheeks. So getting a good cushion can make you stay out there longer, requiring you not to have to stand up and move around so much, and therefore balance doesn't become as much of an issue. And the eighth reason kayak fishing sucks is probably one of my least favorites, and it's using the bathroom when you're on the water.
Uh-oh.
What?
People.
You're in a kayak, you're much more exposed, you're sitting low on the water, you're not hidden by anything. So if you gotta stand up and pee, you better make sure there's no one around you that can see you, or they're gonna be making fun of you forever. So don't do that. Don't expose yourself when you're out on the water. But it could be tricky when you have to go. There's a couple different options that you could do, right? Obviously, you could stand up and pee. That's the easy way to do it. 99% of the time, that's what I do it. Also, if you have a pedal drive, you can lift it up. Generally, you have a hole, right? You have a hole in your hole. You could just like pee there. That's easy. You can do it from a seated position. Also, you can do the Gatorade method. You have a Gatorade bottle, you just pee in the bottle, save it for later. And lastly, there is a thing called disposable diaper bags or disposable pee bags that are meant for you to take with you, and you pee in it, and it has like that same stuff as a diaper and it just sucks it up. So kind of weird, but some people do that and that makes it easier. That's only for number one. If you have to do number two, Then you gotta take some dude wipes with you, go find a tree stump, take care of business that way. And lastly, if you're a lady, I'm sorry, I got no tips for you, man. It's tough. For girls, it's 10 times harder. I guess you just have to get out at the ramp and go to the bathroom. But that is why kayak fishing sucks, if you gotta use the bathroom. And the 9th reason kayak fishing sucks is weight capacities matter. Okay, so weight capacities don't matter as much when you're on a John boat, when you're on a bass boat. You're not out here wondering if 350 pounds is too much for that, because it's not. When you're in a kayak, every pound matters. And you're not just taking yourself. You're taking your gear, your batteries, your motor, everything else that you're taking with you on the water. So weight capacities are a huge metric when it comes to the stability of a kayak, because you don't want to dive in or lose your balance or anything else because you're in a kayak that's not rated for your weight. There's a lot of great options for higher weight capacity kayaks, but you got to look out for them. The ones that you find at Dick's and Walmart and Sam's Club, they're not going to have higher weight capacities for the most part. You're going to have to really look for some of the ones. If you want more than a 400-pound weight capacity, you're going to have to look for those. Also, remember, you got to take your gear with you. So if you weigh 250 pounds, don't just get a kayak that holds 250 pounds. Get something that holds 100 pounds more. And that's generally like a safe bet, because that way it covers your gear. And if you want a battery and a motor, remember, you got to get even more than that. So lots of great options. And I actually did a video for the 7 best high weight capacity kayaks, which I will link down below so you guys can check them out. One thing to keep in mind though, when it comes to these higher capacity kayaks, is that generally speaking, these are bigger and heavier kayaks. They're going to be in excess of 11.5 feet. They're going to be, maybe 35 to 38 inches wide. And they're also going to be around that 90 to 100 pound mark. So you got to remember this stuff. If you're planning on roof-topping a kayak, don't go and get a 100-pound kayak, because you're going to have a hard time getting it up there and you might not even like it and you'll end up selling it. So keep in mind how you're transporting your kayak and what you can physically handle and the weight of your kayak when you're doing that purchasing decision on getting a heavy-duty, high-weight capacity kayak. And the 10th reason kayak fishing sucks is because it's uncomfortable. Okay, this isn't all kayaks. Generally speaking, these are the cheaper kayaks. Cheaper kayaks that you get from those big box stores that I mentioned, they have worse seats. Their seats don't have a lot of cushion. They don't have a lot of support. They generally don't even have a full seat, okay? So if you get a cheaper kayak, it's gonna be generally less comfortable. If you get it sit inside kayak, it's gonna be super uncomfortable because you have to sit in that position for a long time. If you can sit in a position for a long time and not move around too much, or if you're only fishing for 2 or 3 hours at a time, then maybe it doesn't matter as much. But if you want to fish for 6, 8, 10 hours at a time, you have to get a kayak that has a comfortable seat, something that you could move around in and feel comfortable and not feel like every movement's going to tip the kayak. And you're going to have to get something with a little bit of a higher weight capacity so that you get that added stability. Sometimes the lack of movement can really bother folks. There's some people that if you don't stand up, your back can get stiff, your knees can get stiff. Listen, we're all getting older. That happens and that's okay. But you have to think about that when you are out there on the water. You might be out there for an extended period. Can you stay seated for that long? Or do you have a safe enough kayak that you can stand up in, stretch, crack your back, whatever it is, turn around in? That's all things you have to think about when it comes to the comfort of a kayak. Don't expect a lot of comfort from those cheaper kayaks. And number 11 in the list of reasons kayak fishing can suck is that you have limited speed. Don't go buying a kayak, even if you have a motor or not, thinking you're gonna go 10 miles an hour or you're gonna be bouncing around this gigantic lake. That's just not reality. If you're paddling, guess what? You have a limit on how much you can paddle without getting totally exhausted. And you have a limit of how long you can keep that maximum speed up. Same thing if you're pedaling, because pedaling, you have more strength in your legs. I enjoy pedaling way more than I do paddling, but you have limited energy. If you're gonna pedal for 6 or 8 hours, you're gonna get to that boat ramp, you're probably gonna be gassed, especially if you're fighting current, you're fighting wind all day long. So you wanna pace yourself so that you can be out there longer, you can enjoy yourself, you're not gassed the entire time, and you want to have energy left for when you're loading up your kayak later on. It will take you longer to navigate a lake. If you're in a big lake, you're not going to get to fish the entire lake. You're probably going to have to focus on one area of the lake and tear that part up, right? So before you get there, look up on the maps and see the area that you want to fish, and then the launch is there and you kind of know what is a reasonable distance for you to go. One way to get around the speed factor is to get a kayak that can cut the water better. There are some kayaks that are just meant for cutting through the water better. but generally those are gonna be your narrower kayaks. They're not gonna be as wide, therefore they're not gonna be as stable. You can also get a fast motor. So there's some good powerful motors, you know, the Newport Vessels NK180 Pro, the Newport Vessels NK300, which is a 36 volt battery, and it gives you 3 horsepower. Something like that, you're gonna be rocking and rolling. You'll get a lot more speed than you will versus a lot of those other motors. So just something to keep in mind when you're kayak fishing. And the 12th reason kayak fishing can suck is the manual labor aspect of it. If you're out there paddling all day long, you are gonna get wiped. You're gonna be gassed, tired, exhausted, everything. And that might take away from the joy of fishing, especially if you're out there all day long, especially if you're going a long distance, fighting wind and current for a long time. A lot of times people don't want to mix that into their fishing. Even if you're pedaling, remember, you're using the biggest muscles in your body to propel you forward. But if that doesn't bother you, then that's a great thing, because now you're in the mindset of you're getting exercise while you're fishing. Some people want nothing to do with that. Some people are all about it. If you're paddling all day long, you're working out your shoulders, your back, your chest. It's a great workout. Same thing for pedaling. You're working out your legs, you're burning calories. This is something that breaks up our typically sedentary lifestyle. At least when you're out there having fun, you might not notice so much that you're working out. And if you don't want anything to do with that, you can get a motor. A motor will take out a lot of the physical exertion part of kayak fishing. You're still obviously getting a little bit tired from the loading and unloading, because now that you have a motor and a battery, it's gonna take a little bit more effort when you're getting in and out of the water. You're gonna spend a little bit more money because you're registering your kayak with the state, but that works for a lot of people. I do both options. I have a pedal drive kayak and a motorized kayak, and guess what? I love them both. And the last reason people think kayak fishing sucks is because it's less social. Kayaks are not meant in general to take multiple people on the water. Can you buy a tandem kayak? Sure. It's also known as the divorce boat for a very good reason. Your normal kayak that you buy for fishing is made usually with one angler in mind. Some of them have more weight capacity that you could put another seat in the front, another seat behind the main chair, and those situations can work. Some people love it. They love taking out their kids on their kayak, and that's fantastic. But remember, the likelihood of getting hooked or hooking someone is higher. Remember also weight capacities. That needs to be on the top of your mind. Even if your boat can fit another person, do you exceed the weight capacity? Some people just love to take other people fishing with them. And if that's the case, then maybe a boat is right for you, so you can take your buddies, your wife, your kids with you and be more comfortable in a boat versus a kayak. But if you're like me and you like to just go out and fish by yourself, then kayak fishing is for you. But I also like to be social and fish with my buddies, and guess what? They have kayaks too. When we want to go fishing together, we launch together. We'll talk, we'll hang out, but then when we're ready, everyone goes their own way, and you fish over here, I fish over there, you fish over there, and then we come back together and we talk smack to each other or whatever. So just getting a kayak is not the end to socialize fishing. Like, you can still socialize with your buddies if they have their own kayak. I just don't love the idea of having someone else on my kayak, but it doesn't mean that it won't work for you. Now it's your turn. Let me know in the comments below what's your least favorite thing about kayak fishing. And if you still want to go kayak fishing and you're just getting started, check out my full beginner's guide to kayak fishing right here. So till next time, guys, peace and God bless.